A map of South America.
States,
Yeah, just to be able to identify.
countries and states.
No, states and countries, same.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. Now, I did put up study maps, right? I did put up the states you need to know study maps. Y'all found that? Okay. So now the study maps are blank, right? The study maps are, and that's so you can practice, right? Because finding a map of South America is easy to go on Google. But a blank map might be a little harder to find, so I put up a blank map for you. The next one will be Europe. The next one will be Africa, and the next one will be the Middle East. Now, in terms of Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, I'm not going to expect you to know every single nation. I just put up the states you need to know there because these are much more complicated places. And although I probably should make you memorize every nation in Europe, I'm not going to do that. So.
Is the map going to work for all of them?
Yeah, it should work. Now, I also have a study guide up for exam 2, right? We'll be having exam 2 on the 15th. So we have 3 lectures. And then exam 2, I'm going to get exam 1 done quickly. I promise I haven't graded it yet, but I will do that because I know you want the grades for that. And remember also, I will be putting up ancillary material because we don't cover everything in class. And when you look at the study guide, you can cuss me out a little bit. You can even send me an nasty email. It's okay. I promise you the study guide for exam 3 is a lot smaller. It's just kind of how the class works out, that this study guide tends to be a bit more extensive. So I apologize in advance, I guess.
Is exam 2 worse than exam 1?
The exam's the same thing. 35, fill in the blank, essay question. It's the exact same format. The only difference is there's more terms on the second. Exam 3 has fewer terms on the second. So I'll make it up to you. You're not happy with me. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. Don't blame it on me. Blame it on all the old people that died, right? This is history, right? You're going to have to, it's just a lot of material, I want to say. Speaking of which, let's get to it. Persia. We mentioned that Persia is sick and tired of these pesky Greeks giving them a hard time. This is particularly notable. No, somebody check the study guide. I mean, the answer. That's bad.
Did you try to rip?
I did rip from you. I've got a little thing that says answer key, test 1 through 4, answer keys, and when you play. Let's keep going. Okay, the Persians. This is Persia, okay? But you have to remember that cartography and geography aren't quite as exact a science in the ancient world as they are today. And so where exactly Persia ends and Greece begins really depends on who you ask. And if you talk to the Greeks, this coast here really isn't Persia, and we're not going to answer to the Persian emperor. But if you ask the Persian emperor, this is absolutely my dominion, and everybody there answers to me. You get the idea. It's kind of a gray area. This is also a backwater, kind of. Nobody really does a lot here. This is not a significant part of the Persian Empire. So the Persian emperor has let it slide, but the trick is if you allow one pesky ethnic group to boss you around, all of a sudden the immense diversity of the empire will start causing problems. And so the Persian emperor cannot back down. That's how dictators work. They can't ever be allowed to lose. The emperor was Darius, and in 490, he went to war with Athens. And it is the Athenians that are really the ones pushing against the Persians. They're the ones who absolutely plant their flag in the ground and defend their Greek identity. And a big part of this Greek identity is we answer to nobody except ourselves. It is not going to be a particularly difficult task to defeat Athens if you are the Persian emperor. That is, this is a Goliath empire. Athens is a city-state. He certainly doesn't have to send the entire Persian army, the massive Persian army. All he has to do is send a small force, crush Athens into submission. The rest of Greece will fall in line, and that will be problem solved. I'm moving a little faster than I would like. The Athenians, of course, know that the Persians are coming. They have plenty of spies over here, and there's plenty of communication back and forth given the way that part of the world works. And so if you are Athens, the smart move is to go to Sparta, right? The smart move is to turn to the Spartans. And they don't necessarily like each other, but they are in the same Greek family. Because, of course, the Spartans have a much more effective army. And if all of Greece united against Persia, you can see it would be particularly difficult to win, almost impossible, but certainly Athens alone. And so they go to the Spartans and they say, look, we may not be friends, but we have a common enemy. The Persians are coming and we really could use your help here, you being Sparta with your incredible army. Sparta would not help them. Sparta told Athens that they were on their own. Forget it. And said, look, the Persians are not stopping with us. This is an attempt to conquer Greece. We all better be on the same team here. But Sparta drew a line, absolutely not. Now, I'm going to write on this map here. Again, I need blank space. I don't have any, but these numbers are estimates, guesstimates, not perfect, but this is the best we can come up with. Persia sent 20,000. Persia sent 20,000 men to conquer Athens, which of course is only a small piece of the Persian army. The best Athens can come up with is 10,000 men. All of the young Athenian men soldier up. 10,000 is about the best they can do. So we're going to outnumber them 2-1. Persia never loses. Persia never gets defeated. Most enemies of Persia surrender before the fight even starts because there is no hope. You step in the ring with Mike Tyson, the first thing you do is lie down on the ground and count to 10, right? You don't stand a chance, so don't even go there. Well, Athens wouldn't do it. What the Persians did, and I'm gonna have to do I have a blank sheet here? What the Persians did was decide to divide their force. We have 20,000 Persians. And 10,000 Athenians. And if this is Athens, if this is Athens down here, the port of Athens is extremely well defended. Now, these are water people, and Athens has a navy, and they're going to defend the deep water port that is Athens. And so if the Persians try to sail their boats right into Athens, those boats will get attacked. Dumb idea. North of Athens is a place called Marathon, and it is rural. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, and it has a nice, gently sloping beach that goes right into the water, which is perfect for us to pull our ships to and hop our soldiers off. And Marathon is 26 miles away. This is 26 miles. And so what Persia decides to do is split its fleet. 10,000 will sail to Marathon and unload at Marathon right onto the beach, and another 10,000 will go to Athens. And that puts Athens in a bind. We can stay in our city and defend it, but then an army will land north and march on us. Or we can march our army to fight in Marathon, but then our city will be wide open for invasion. So it's a lose-lose. There's no winning solution here. What the Athenians did was soldier up their army and got together in the morning when they knew the Persians were coming. They put on all of their armor, got all of their weapons, and picked a spot way, way, way over there. All right, man, let's go. And they all ran to that spot, stopped, got their breath. Okay, let's run back home. They all ran back home. And then they did it again, 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 and then they had lunch. And then they did it again, and they did it again, and they did it again. And for several weeks, that was their preparation, among other things. What are they doing?
Oh, they're training.
They're training, they're getting in shape. They're getting in shape. We might be able to put only 10,000 men, but we're going to be 10,000 men in very good shape. And they decided they were going to defend Marathon. So the Athenians sent all of their army to Marathon. Their city is undefended now. Their city is undefended. The 10,000 Persians show up at the beaches, and the Athenians are about a mile back. Now understand, the Persians are incredibly arrogant. They never lose. Most battles with Persia end before the fighting even starts, because you do not fight somebody who you cannot defeat. And so the Persians just naturally assume that this will be a cakewalk. They're relishing at the opportunity to stomp these Athenians. And they unload their boats onto the beach, and the Athenians don't harass them. The Athenians just stay a mile back, do nothing. And that surprises the Persians. Why on earth would they not harass us when we're trying to unload? But that's the problem. So they unload, the boats go back out into the water, you know, a little bit back, you know, to weigh anchor. Persians set up camp, the Athenians don't do anything, the Athenians are over there, you know. The next morning, the Athenians get up, and it's game time. The Athenians line up in a, well, I'll let you see. The Athenians line up like this. They put group them in this way, group them in this way, like a rectangle with an open side. And they immediately start in very tight formation, charging toward the Persians, which are on the beach, you know, all just a big old huddled mass, you know, bring it on. Right? Now, of course, when the Persians see the Athenians charging at them in full battle armor, the Persians are aware of the fact that by the time the Athenians get there, they're going to be out of steam, right? You know, nobody can run a mile, 2 miles, whatever, in full battle armor, be fine when it gets there, but of course, we already know that ain't going to be the case. And so when the Athenians slam into the Persians, they're warmed up, they're ready to fight. And what the Persians didn't realize, whenever they saw these, you know, Athenian men charging in their battle armor, was that behind the Athenian men were their archers. And they slammed into the Persians, and immediately the archers start sending arrows over their own men and into the ranks of the Persians. Persians can't go this way, that way. The Persians are, of course, being pushed into the water with arrows falling down onto them. It was an absolute slaughter. It was an absolute slaughter. A one-sided victory, if ever there was one. Now, of course, the problem is Athens is undefended, right? Another 10,000 Persians are headed toward an undefended city. And so the Athenian general said, okay, who is the fastest man among us? Who is in the absolute best shape? And a guy stepped up and he said, okay, strip off all your armor and run as fast as you can to the city. Tell them that we have won. Tell them we are headed there as fast as possible to defend the city. So do not surrender. Do not give the city up. We will be there double quick. And that's exactly what the Athenians did. They immediately started moving as fast as they could to the city. And of course, these men are in great shape, right? These men are ready to go. And the 26-mile run between Athens and Marathon, or between Marathon and Athens, is a symbol of that one soldier, I forget his name, that ran all the way as fast as he could after the battle. And the legend has it, he got to the middle of the city. He said, he was bare naked, by the way. He said, well, he had to strip everything off. He said, congratulations, we won. You know, don't give up the city. Then he fell over and died. That's how the story goes. So anyway, the Athenian army shows up. The Persian fleet sails to the port of Athens. The Athenian soldiers are there ready to fight them. Obviously, something very terrible has happened, and so the Persians turned around. The other 10,000 just turned around. Athens wins. Athens wins. Now, this victory at Marathon isn't just a David versus Goliath victory. Yes, it is. It's an indication that you can win if you outsmart your opponent, right? You don't have to be bigger, you have to be smart. I'll take smart over size any day of the week, and we will see this in other instances. With the Hebrews, whenever y'all were supposed to study the Hebrews, you know, David versus Goliath. What's the story of David versus Goliath, right? This big, angry, you know, Philistine is harassing the Hebrews, and little David is just a shepherd, and he challenges Goliath to a fight. And of course, I can stomp this little kid, right? But of course, what did Goliath not realize? He had a sling, right? And of course, shepherd boys have to use slings to run wolves off. So they're very, very, very accurate with their slings. It's a little leather strap with a rock. You swing it around your head and let it go, and you can really do some damage. And of course, if you're constantly having to throw them at wolves to keep the wolves away from your sheep, you're going to be a good shot, right? And so, you know, you give me a kindergartner with a gun, right? I don't care if you're Andre the Giant, the kindergartner with the gun's going to win, right? And that's David versus Goliath. David stepped up, and Goliath was too stupid to realize that he's about to get brained with a rock, and he did. I'll take smarter over bigger any day of the week. That's the moral of the story. And of course, David went on to become a king, right? David went on to rule over the Hebrews because he was ambitious, and just, you know, it was all uphill. I mean, it was all you know, up for him. Anyway, well, this has caused tremendous turmoil among the Persian leadership because a tiny little Greek city-state has defeated the Persians. And understand, Persia never loses. The very fact that they were beaten by the smallest entity possible is absolutely humiliating. Well, Darius dies. That's the end of it for him. And the new emperor is Xerxes. The new emperor is Xerxes. Now, Xerxes, number one, has to prove that Persia is not to be messed with. Xerxes, now he has a particularly important goal ahead of him, because the minute the defeated Marathon starts spreading across Persia, all of these other ethnicities start getting their own ideas. But also because he is the new emperor, he has to prove himself. The emperor has to sit on top of a great accomplishment to be respected. And so conquering the Greeks, putting an end to the idea that Athens can beat us, solving this problem is a way for Xerxes to exert his own power and send a clear message to any of you other pesky people that refuse to recognize my power. And you better believe Xerxes ain't sending 20,000 men. He's going to send the entire Persian army. He is going to send an army so big, I don't care how good a shape you're in, you have no chance. You have just kicked a gorilla, and he ain't gonna play nice. You have just gone into King Kong's cage and kicked him right in the teeth. That is not a good idea. He sends an army, again, these are all estimates, guesstimates. He sends an army of 200,000. It is a massive Persian force. It is so big they cannot move it by water. They've got to go by land. They have to go across what is today the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus, between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and they have to travel mostly by land. And they are headed straight toward Athens. Athens is going to cease to exist when we're done with Athens. We are going to set an example like no other. And here's Athens right here. Once again, Athens turns to Sparta. Fellas, we got to do something about this, guys. The 200,000 Persians are coming. They're going to conquer all of Greece. I don't care how tough you guys think you are. There's nothing we can do to stop this. The only hope we have is for all of us Greeks to finally come together. And even then, it's a serious long shot. This is the biggest army ever assembled in human history up to that point. Sparta again will not help. Forget it. We're done. This is not our fight. You guys decided to cause this, not us. So Sparta will not help them, and the Athenians just cannot understand why on earth is Sparta not soldiering up. This is what the Spartan army is supposed to do. The whole Spartan army is we're the baddest dudes in the world, and here is the one chance where they could actually be useful, but they will not do it. One of the Spartan kings, remember Sparta has two kings. One of the Spartan kings, a fellow by the name of Leonidas, disagreed. We have to help Athens. We just have to. And he rounded up 300 Spartan soldiers. There we go. He rounded up 300 Spartan soldiers.
No freaking way.
And joined the Athenians. 300. Now, of course, Leonidas as a Spartan king is a top general. He is a leader of men if ever there was one. Nobody is better at leading an army than Leonidas. And so, of course, the Athenians put him in charge of all of it. Okay, you're in charge now. You're the general. You tell us what to do. And Leonidas led the Athenian army with his 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. The Battle of Thermopylae. Now, there's more than one way to spell Thermopylae. I think I spelled it differently on the study guide, and I don't care. Now, they have no chance. Okay, if there were 10,000 plus 300 Greeks, 200,000 Persians are going to beat them. I don't care. The numbers are just too overwhelming. And that's exactly what happened. The legend has it that for 3 days, the Greeks held the Persians off. But eventually, of course, the Persian army overwhelmed them. And the real legend is that when it was obviously over, when it was a done deal, Leonidas ordered the Athenians to retreat. Your army needs to remain intact. You have a war ahead of you. And he and the 300 men stayed and fought until they were all dead. And so that's the legend of Leonidas. And the Persians didn't realize that the Greeks had retreated because the 300 Spartans were being so awesome. And of course, they're all dead. And there you go. And here Yes.
I don't get like, if there's like an army camped and like on your beach or a mile away, like I would just tag them like when they're all sleeping, bro. Honestly.
Well, they're gonna have sentries.
And whatnot.
Sentries.
There are people that keep watching.
People that keep watch at night. When armies camp at night, they always have sentries on guard. You know, if you guys are awake and they can, now, yes, there's many examples of battles being fought where one side attacks at night. Because of course, again, the men are asleep, so it's gonna take a little while to kind of get together.
I didn't go in there and slaughter them.
But you also have to keep, now, and whole sentry duty is ridiculously important. Okay, when you are put on sentry duty, for much of human history up until the modern era, if you go to sleep on sentry duty, you're executed. Just like that, you are, sleeping on sentry duty is execution, and that's just the way it is. In fact, like Andrew Jackson, executed a man who fell asleep on sentry duty in the War of 1812. Okay, this is something that is all the way up, because of course, if the sentry goes to sleep, your army is completely vulnerable. You know, if the sentry goes to sleep, the enemy can attack, and so you absolutely must stay awake during sentry duty. The Texans sort of won a battle against Mexico in 1836. Yeah, obviously, this is not ancient Greece, but the Mexicans defeated the Texans at the Alamo, overwhelmed the Alamo, killed them all. And then the War of Independence of Texas started, and the Mexicans were having a siesta. It wasn't at night, but they were chilling out in the afternoon because a siesta is a thing for Mexicans. And that was the Battle of San Jacinto. And Sam Houston attacked them while they were chilling out in the afternoon, and their guns weren't available to them very easily. And so when the Texans attacked, Mexico wasn't able to get its army together fast enough. So sentry duty is a thing. Sentry duty is
Still about like century, like years.
century. And it's not on the test, but
That's
I think you're gonna trick us.
I'm not gonna trick you, I promise. So anyway, now, I'll get into this later. Now the Greeks have a thing going on. Now they're in trouble. The Persian army marches on Athens, burns it to the ground, and now Greece unites. All of the city-states come together. Sparta takes the lead. The Spartan army soldiers up. And now we have all of Greece resisting this giant Persian army. After the burning of Athens, Greece gets it together. They were able to destroy the Persian fleet at the Battle of Salamis Bay. And they did it by disguising soldiers and sailors. And so they armed the soldiers and they tricked the Persian fleet into going into a trap. And they ended up burning the Persian fleet. Again, be smarter, not bigger. I'm not getting into the details because we don't have time. But what this means is that the Persian soldiers are now on their own. They can't supply themselves from outside. And so a 200,000 man army is in Greece, but it is disconnected from home. And the Greeks go full scorched earth. They start burning their crops, slaughtering their livestock. Everything that the Persian army can use gets destroyed. Yes, that means we're going to starve, but so will you. We'll see who outlasts, right? That was the goal. It's called scorched earth. It's a policy that it's a technique that people have used all the way up until the present day. And so after about a year, the Persian army just shrinks, shrivels. The men start starving. There's problems, everywhere the Persians go, the Greeks refuse to fight them one-on-one, but they harass them. They'll kill a few here, they'll kill a few there. They show up from anywhere, and it just whittles down the strength of the Persian army. Now, what happens? What do we call it? When a large, powerful army invades an obviously weaker nation, and so the weaker nation doesn't fight them one-on-one. They just attack them here and there and do all kinds of harassment. That's called guerrilla war. Now, it is not guerrilla war like Big Monkey. It is guerrilla. That is a Spanish term. Guerrilla. You see, when Napoleon invaded Spain, this is what the Spanish did. The Spanish were too weak to fight the French one-on-one, and so they just harassed the daylights out of them year after year. And it made the war so expensive and so bloody and such a hassle, it wasn't worth it anymore. That's what the Vietnamese did to us when we invaded Vietnam. That's what the Afghan Taliban did to us. horrible as the Taliban is, we could not occupy the whole country, and they, blew up our supplies and, roadside bombs and stuff like that. And over time, morale goes down. You get angry. Is this really worth it? We just want to go home, and so on and so forth. Eventually, the Greeks got together, and when the Persian army was as weak as it could be, hungry, out of everything, frustrated, they just want to go home. They've been in Greece for 2 years. They're no closer to subjugating Greece than when they showed up. A unified Greek army attacked the Persians at the Battle of Plataea. A unified Greek army attacked at the Battle of Plataea. And they won.
Bruh.
The Persian army was thoroughly defeated and limped home. Persian war is over, Greeks win. And it is a classic example of how a much weaker state can win by applying the correct tactics. Don't play the game they want you to play the game you want to play. And yes, it will be bloody and you're going to sacrifice and it's going to hurt, but you're going to play your game, not their game. That's the way you win. And that's what the Greeks did. So the Persian War is over. Now the big question is, why would Sparta not help Greece? Not Athens. Why was Sparta not willing to help Athens? Seems kind of crazy, right? Until you think like a Spartan. The Spartans are the military geniuses. They're not only brave soldiers, but they're also strategists. I mean, all they do is sit around and study how to fight and win wars. Athens and Sparta are rivals. And Athens and Sparta don't necessarily like each other, even though they're both Greece. And so I've got an idea, my fellow Spartans. We know we can win this. We know the Persians are screwing up. We know that we can fight a guerrilla war. We know 200,000 men is a really stupid sized army to send because you're going to have to feed all of them. A much smarter army would have been 50,000 men, right? That way you could supply them over land. You could send in fresh troops if you're needed. You could sustain them. Or sending the whole army at once only opens up the army for mass starvation, which is exactly what we're going to make sure happens. So we know we're going to win. How about we let them take out our rival first?
Oh, nice.
How about we let Athens get destroyed? We come in and save the day. And when it's over with, Sparta now dominates the Greek cities. Now, we don't know that that's what Sparta was doing. There's no record of that definitively, but it's pretty obvious what Sparta was doing there. Okay, they knew how this was going to play out. Well, after this is over, there's a lot of infighting among the Greeks because Athens is very angry at Sparta's games, obviously. Other city-states are severely harmed as a result of this war. Yes, they won, but boy, it was costly. There's a lot of blame to go around. You didn't supply enough men. You didn't work hard enough. I don't think you burned your crops. Those Spartans, those Persians were able to get a little bit of food from you. Was that you over there that was whispering a peace with them at the worst part of the war? Maybe you were trying to negotiate your own little way out. Right? There's all kinds of issues going on. So I've got an agreement, my fellow Greeks. We're going to have to come up with a deal. If Persia comes back, and they very well might, we all go to war immediately, unified, no questions asked. We will create a Greek alliance so that there will never be any other question as to what we're going to do if we're invaded again. Well, that's what they agreed to, except they were angry at each other. And so Athens formed its alliance, which we call the Delian League. And Sparta formed its alliance called the Peloponnesian League. So instead of one alliance, there was two. They do not necessarily trust each other. There's a lot of bitter feelings over how the war was conducted, despite the fact that they won.
Which one was the Athens?
Athens is Delian, Sparta is Peloponnesian. And just to let you know, this piece of land right here, dominated by Sparta, is called the Peloponnesus. is this piece of land right there. That's the Peloponnesus. And it's only connected to Greece by this tiny little piece of land right there.
So Sparta, they went to war with Athens,
They're gonna go to war with that.
Oh,
We're not to the Peloponnesian War yet. Spoiler, you can see where this is going, right? This is often considered the stand to Persia, the Persian War, when they were actually all working together. This is often considered sort of the peak of classical Greece. There was that brief moment when they were all unified. Let me show you real quick just a few. Okay. This is, stop right. This is called a phalanx, okay? It is a battle formation that the Greeks more or less invented. We fight together, we fight better as a team than we do as individuals. You know, when you look at, Game of Thrones or whatever, they all just sort of go in and hack and chop. It is not every man for himself. We all fight as individuals when we go to war. Now, the Persians did do a lot of that, and that's why the Persians weren't so good when the real battle started. The Greeks came up with military tactics. Let's get in shape. Let's have uniform armor, uniform equipment, all fight together in a unit. And so what the Greek men would do was they would form a wall with their shields, and then there would be a man behind you. And so when the enemy came at you, it would be all of you together. And there were many different types of phalanx formations and many different fighting styles. Many times you didn't stab the guy in front of you, you stabbed the guy that was going after your friend, right? And then everybody sort of does it that way. This particular formation with big long pikes, what's that all about? Anybody want to guess?
I guess so they can't.
Cavalry?
Cavalry, yeah, sorry, yeah, no, it's cavalry. This is the shish kebab the horses. If they charge at you on horses, you can stick the horses, war down. And yet we don't feel bad about killing the men. You're not like, oh, yeah, but the horses,
Humans are evil.
yeah, we are evil. We are. I just no other way around it. I completely agree. Now, what happens if the man dies in front? The next guy just steps right up, right? That's the whole idea. And so, you step right up. And of course, discipline had to be extremely firm, because if one man suddenly chickens out and runs the whole formation collapses, right? So every man has to be just right. What they would do is even line up men of certain sizes. Each line would try to be a man of the same height, the same basic strength, and so it would be a uniform line as close to it as they could. This is some of the Greek armor from this era. There's actually, believe it or not, a rather notable amount of Greek armor that has been pulled off of battlefields, of ancient Greek armor in museums and warehouses and stuff. It's not necessarily rare. Greek rank and file were called hoplites. Greek rank and file were called hoplites. And this is the soldier. We got the helmet. We got the breastplate. If you're wondering what's with the nipples, right? Why on earth would my breastplate have nipples on it? Believe it or not, it was psychological. Okay, it was like to kind of create the
Body of steel.
body of steel. Yeah, this is a part of my body. The breastplate fits me perfectly, and it's almost like another layer of my own skin. So it may look a little odd.
They were accessorizing.
They were accessorizing. And a lot of people make fun of the George Clooney Batman movie because the bat outfit had nipples on it, and like, why on earth did Batman have nipples? And they were modeling his bat suit out of a hoplite armor. That was the whole point of George Clooney having nipples on his Batman suit. But so there was a logic to it, but it still looked utterly ridiculous on film. This is a Persian. This is what the Persians might have had. So there you go. Apparently, the Persians were a bunch of garden gnomes. Now this is a recreation. This is not obviously. This is a
spell.
yeah. Yeah. Go make some cookies in a tree with those. This is a recreation. This is not from that era. I was just going out there on a battlefield. This is Leonidas. I don't need to tell you the hero status that Leonidas acquired. Even to this day, if you go to the Greek people and say, who is your greatest hero? Every Greek person will tell you that Leonidas is the greatest hero that has ever existed in Greece. There is even a monument to him. As a matter of fact, there's a monument that was erected to him at the time that is still maintained to this day, because the Greeks have such a respect for Leonidas. For a dude that's about to, get killed by the Persians, he seems to be pretty happy about it. Where are we? Okay, so this is the peak of classical Greece, but it is, there's a lot of stress involved. I'll go ahead and tell you about the Peloponnesian War. They don't like each other. And over time, they grow very mistrustful of each other because each is building up their military and building up their strength. And when my rival builds up his strength, I'm going to build up mine, right? I can't let the other side get bigger than me. And so over time, Greece becomes extremely militarized. Greece becomes extremely militarized. Eventually, the Spartans and the Spartan League, the Peloponnesians, they start pushing colonization in other places. You know, the Greeks have all of these settlements in Persia. The Spartans are very scared about Athenian expansion. They actually send some men over to Italy. We don't need to get into the detail on that one too much. What we need to know is, sure enough, we're going to have a war. In 431 BC, war breaks out between Athens and Sparta and their allies. The Delian League and the Peloponnesian League go to war. And they are so evenly matched that neither side can win. They're so evenly matched that neither side has a decisive advantage. And what this means is that the war just drags on.
It was 430 BC.
431.
It was Athens and Sparta, right?
Athens and Sparta, yeah. You know, it's really kind of a weird irony to it that it may be better off if one side wins conclusively, right? The whole point is to stop the war, right? The whole point is to make it end. You know, the worst part about all of it is that, you know, lives get destroyed and people get killed. Again, don't write this down. And I'm not saying my opinion on it, but what's the war that's going on right now that's got everybody so anxious? Yeah, Russia's invading Ukraine. Yeah, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Ukraine has always been dominated by Russia in one way or another, going back to the Middle Ages. Now, Ukraine is its own state. The Ukrainian people are not Russian. They have their own language, but they are very much in the same ethnic family. And, you know, Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire for many, many, many years. And so Russian dominance over Ukraine is certainly not anything out of the ordinary. I can assure you of that. That's actually been the tradition. Now, what happened, of course, is Russia has invaded Ukraine, and Russia is beating up on Ukraine pretty badly. And we don't like this because this is Russia being the aggressor. And so what we're doing is we're helping the Ukrainians, aren't we? Which ramps up the tension. We're giving the Ukrainians all sorts of fancy military hardware and military equipment that they're able to use to resist the Russians. And that's good if the Ukrainians want to resist the Russians. But of course, what's the counter argument to that? I'm sorry?
Is that right?
Well, first of all, it isn't really our business when this is an area Russia's always dominated. I'm just trying to help us out, right? Well, business isn't of ours, it's Eastern Europe, right? But of course, if you're somebody who doesn't like war, maybe it would be a lot better if Russia just won the war quickly and it ended, right? Now, that of course means that Russia controls Ukraine, which it always has. But at the same time, when you see apartment buildings full of children getting, you know, bombed every single day, I think those children would be better off controlled by the Russians than dead. Right? I think those Ukrainian cities would be better off occupied by Russia than blown to smithereens. I'm saying that's one argument to be made, right? And so maybe a counter argument is if we mind our own business and let the Russians win quickly, at least there's no more fighting, right? At least the war actually comes to an end. But then again, whenever we allow Russia to do that, what happens next? Russia does more, right? Russia only becomes more aggressive and invades and conquers some other area, or, you know, so when you give the dictator what he wants, in some cases you can end the fighting, but of course, when you stand up, what you do is you send a message that you can't do it anymore. Right? Well, yeah, so it's kind of a weird problem, right? Yes, we need to stand up to this kind of aggression, but of course it means that there's going to be more fighting, more death, more nastiness here.
That's what they did with Hitler.
Absolutely, you know, yeah, the biggest foreign policy blunder of the 20th century in all of modern history was when the Allies allowed Hitler to have what he wanted. You know, when Hitler showed up at the Munich conference in 1938 and said, "This is what I want, and we're going to war," the Allies gave it to him rather than go to war. They said, "Okay, Hitler, you can have it," because the minute they gave Hitler what he wanted, he just took more and started the war anyway. Right? You don't, if you give in to the bully, what does the bully do? Keep bullying. If you stand up to the bully, you might get a bloody nose, but the bully's going to leave you alone. Right? As a matter of fact, if you stand up to the bully, you might find out how weak the bully really is. And that's kind of what Ukraine is showing right now. You know, standing up to Russia, we're learning of the incompetence of the Russian army. It's not nearly as strong as they would like to be. And so these are really These are issues, there's no simple answer, okay, is the whole point I'm making. There's arguments to be made on those things. Anyway, neither side could win, so the war just drags on and on and on. Sooner or later, this war's got to come to an end, right? Well, that's exactly sort of what happened, okay? That's exactly sort of what happened. In 421, after 10 years of fighting, an armistice was reached. Neither one of us can win, so we'll stop fighting. Now, an armistice is not peace.
You say 421?
421, so after 10 years. Armistice simply means we're not going to fight it again. That's an armistice. I hate you, you hate me, we're still enemies, but we'll quit fighting. That's an armistice. What happened, of course, is they ran out of young men. They ran out of soldiers. And so they all agreed, we'll just stop fighting.
Armistice or armistice?
Yes. Yes.
I spelled it way wrong.
Armistice. When two enemies agree to stop fighting, they don't agree to anything else. In 414, they started up again.
Bruh.
Well, after 7 years, the young men can now grow up. They've now reached fighting age, right? All those little boys are now young men, so we can build another army. 414, yes. We killed off all the young men, but now we've got a whole new batch of young men, so let's go fighting again. Sorry, fellas, I got y'all a little bit stressed out, haven't I? Feel like, dang it, I can't wait to get on. They fought for 10 more years, and finally one side ended up winning. Which was it? Was it the Athenians and their allies or the Spartans?
Athenians.
No, Spartans. I know, it's terrible. I mean, I'm going to say the Spartans are more of the bad guy than the Athenians just because Sparta was such a harsh society. But yes, Sparta ends up winning the Peloponnesian War. Sparta dismantles Athenian democracy, all of the nice stuff that we talked about Athens, the Council of 500 and exploring people rule and all of that. Sparta dismantles all of it and dominates the Greeks. Sparta becomes the superpower in Greece itself. Now we'll get back to that, but let's look at a few things. Before the Peloponnesian War, sort of during this era, this really, now we're going to dial back. We haven't started fighting each other yet. It's not 431. This really does represent the height of classical Greece. There are at any given time 12 to 15 Greek city-states. Each has sort of their own unique Greek identity. They're proud of themselves. They have their own culture and their own values, but they're all Greek. They worship the same God, speak the same language. And we have these leads and don't necessarily trust each other. And so I've got an idea. How about instead of fighting each other, how about we find ways to fight without actually fighting? We'll see who's the fastest, right? We'll see who can throw a javelin the farthest. We'll see who can wrestle, right? All the different skills that a soldier would need to have, we can compete with each other, can't we? Right? And that way I can show that I'm better than you, or you can prove you're better than me, but nobody actually gets hurt. And so what the Greeks came up with were the games. The Greeks came up with athletic competition, which was a way of showing what kind of soldier you are without actually going to war. And the Greek calendar reset every 4 years. It's just how the Greek calendar worked. And that was called the Olympiad. That was called the Olympiad. And they would have a huge set of games to celebrate the Olympiad every 4 years. Now, they had games for all kinds of other reasons too. It's just those games every 4 years were the big ones. Now, there's other aspects of Greece that I want to discuss. At the center of every Greek city was an acropolis. This is sort of the city center, the town square, if you will. It was the political center, it was the economic center, it was where markets were located. And every city-state had an acropolis. And the grandest acropolis of all was, of course, the Acropolis of Athens. Of all the different ones, the Acropolis at Athens was by far the most celebrated. And there was a series of very beautiful buildings that they constructed to celebrate being Athenian. And it was up on the tallest hill in the city. It could be seen for miles. And all across Greece, everybody recognized the Athenian Acropolis as the nicest of them all. Now, the central building of the Athenian Acropolis is the Parthenon. The central building of the Acropolis is the Parthenon. It is a temple at the very peak of the Acropolis. It was constructed during this era, often considered the most beautiful building of the classical age. It is made out of marble, and everybody in here has seen pictures of it. And it's worth noting, the Parthenon was actually in pretty good shape until the 17th century. And the Turks attacked Athens during the 17th century, and there was some gunpowder in the Acropolis, and a cannonball hit and blew it to smithereens. But the Parthenon didn't just crumble, it was blown apart by an explosion, which is beyond tragic. There's a little bit more to it, stop writing. A little bit more to it that I want you to be aware of. All around the peak of the Acropolis were a series of friezes, statues that were carved into the stone. And they're very beautiful, all around mythical events and so on and so forth. And a lot of these had survived, even after the explosion, a lot of them survived. And around the year 1800, just like they are rediscovering Egypt, European scholars are rediscovering ancient Greece in a way that they had never really appreciated. And a Greek archaeologist / rich guy named Lord Elgin made a deal to take the statues from around the Parthenon, the friezes, and bring them back to London and put them in a museum. Now, at the time, Greece was ruled by the Turks, and so the Turkish Sultan didn't care, and he said, that's fine, and he told Lord Elgin, take them, and you can have them. And so stonecutters came in, and they stole all kinds of statuary and other artifacts from the Parthenon and the Acropolis itself, and they put them in what is today the British Museum, a gigantic museum in London. This is so important that an entire wing of the museum is called the Elgin Wing, and it's just where they house these Greek works. And it's very beautiful, and there we go. One thing that we have to understand is that the Greeks considered the human body to be the ultimate expression of perfection. The most beautiful thing that exists is the human body. The most perfect element of humanity is having a body that is perfectly proportioned, and they built their buildings to also be proportioned. Greek architecture is everywhere if you look at them. Just look at the Parthenon, and suddenly you realize the Parthenon's everywhere, right? Parthenon's all over the place that we build, with columns and all of that, all of our buildings. Now, of course, everyone in here has probably thought about the same thing. And what's that with their statues being in a British museum? What do you think the Greeks think about this? They're not happy about it at all. Okay, to this day, of course, modern Greeks are furious that their culture, the most important artifacts and statuaries from ancient Greece, the foundation of Western civilization, are sitting in a non-Greek museum. It goes without saying that the Greeks are very angry about it, and they want their statues back, right? And they have made very clear to the English, we want our statues back. And the real question is, who really owns these? Did Lord Elgin take the statue legally? That's certainly up to debate. Morally speaking, he stole them. Everybody would agree to that. These morally certainly belong to the Greeks. The English will argue that these are safe and secure in the British museums, right? That they're being well cared for. And of course, the Greeks point out that the Germans bombed the daylights out of London during World War II. So no, that doesn't mean that they're safe. And of course, also some of the cleaning that has been done to them over the years has actually damaged them. There's been some real controversy over how the English have actually handled it. So that's not necessarily a strong argument. The English will argue, of course, that these really belong to the world. At some point, these aren't really Greek anymore. At some point, when it's the foundation of Western culture itself, everybody kind of owns these things. Now, the British Museum itself is absolutely chock full of artifacts from various cultures all around the world that were at one point part of the British Empire. I mean, they looted everything. India, Africa, you name it. The British Museum is held. There's all kinds of Egyptian stuff in there, and of course the Egyptians want that back. So if the British do give the Parthenon friezes back, every other culture in the world is going to tell the British, we want our stuff back too. And some of the stuff the British really did flat out steal. I mean, the British really did horrible things in stealing a lot of these artifacts where there is no justification. I don't care how much you want. What is the real reason why the English are not willing to give these back to the Greeks? A little louder.
Money.
Money, that's exactly right. This is a big part of why people go to London. You go to London, you go to the British Museum and see the Rosetta Stone and see the Parthenon friezes and all of that. And so if this went somewhere else, people would go there to see this stuff. And so it's extremely controversial over who owns it. And even to this present day, the Greeks will not sign certain treaties and agreements with the English, and they'll include provisions to give the Parthenon stuff back. And the English will scratch it out before they sign the agreement. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's kind of a big deal. The ultimate expression of beauty is the human form, according to the ancient Greeks. And you don't have to write. I mean, you'll remember this, okay? But that is their view of how it works. The Venus de Milo is an ancient Greek statue that I'm sure you've seen before. The big, I mean, you can look. I mean, it's like she's a real person. I mean, she is perfectly proportioned. This isn't like walk like an Egyptian, over. This is a woman as a woman would actually look. And you have to keep in mind, this is marble, okay? And it looks like that tunic is just sort of barely hanging on there. And of course, the real mystery of her is what were her arms like? Where did her arms actually go? Nobody knows. And that kind of creates a tremendous amount of tension because then in your own mind, you have to kind of wonder how were her arms in their original form. This was discovered around the year 1800 as well on a Greek island, and it sits at the center of the Louvre in Paris. The French equivalent of the Egyptian Museum, which is the greatest museum on the planet, is the Louvre, and it is one of the centerpieces of the Louvre. And so if you wonder what the Venus de Milo is, there you go. This is the death of Lao Kun. It's a mythical story that has to do with the Trojan War. And this is in 3 different pieces. And it was discovered in the 17th century. But I want you to look at the incredible detail here. I mean, I want you to look at the perfection. I mean, this guy is I mean, it's like he's alive. I mean, this is marvel, folks. And the artistry in this is just incomprehensibly good. And it was done by an ancient Greek sculptor with a chisel and a hammer. And when you start wrapping your head around what it would have taken to create something like this, it just blows the mind. Of course, their bodies are, what they would consider to be the perfect physical form. His arm here is really interesting. His arm is like this, right? There's a joint right here where the arm was broken off. And when the statue was first found, there wasn't an arm. That arm wasn't there. And when people looked at it, they thought that his arm was up in the air holding the tail of the snake. And I'm not getting into the story of Lao Kun. It had to do with the Trojan War. And everyone was like, it's going up in the air. And Michelangelo, the sculptor who sculpted David, the greatest sculptor of the Renaissance era, this was discovered when he was alive. And he took a look at it and he said, that's not right. The arm was going behind his head. And everybody thought Michelangelo was crazy. They said, no, his arm is going up in the air. It's obvious that his arm is reaching up in the air. Look at his shoulder. Look at how he is. And Michelangelo said, no, his arm is behind his head. I promise you his arm is behind his head. And early recreations of this all have him with his arm up in the air. And then they discovered this arm about 100 years ago. And sure enough, Michelangelo was right. Yeah, I mean, your artistic genius is very real. It's not just what one person thinks is good, you might not. I mean, there is an actual reality to people who have this ability. And he had the same way of looking at it as a Greek. All right, this was discovered. Again, there's quite a few Greek statues that have been discovered. This is a bronze. The Greeks know how to cast in bronze. So this is a Greek statue too. I'll give y'all a hint. What's this guy? I mean, what's his occupation? What is he aside from doing a good job of being naked? What else? What else is he?
Is he the guy who ran?
You're on the right track. No, he's not. I forget that guy's name too. But what is he? He's a what? What might you think he is? Okay, who's an athlete? That's right. He is an Olympic athlete.
They were naked.
Bare naked. He's a javelin thrower. He's holding a javelin, although the javelin hasn't survived, and he's about to run and throw the javelin. That's what he is. The games were a huge deal to the ancient Greeks. And competitors were always men, unlike the modern Olympics. And yes, they competed completely naked. Okay, I want you to think about this for a minute, okay? The whole point is to celebrate the beauty of the human body, the ability of the human body, the strength of the human body, the perfect proportions of somebody who is physically, ideal. Why on earth would we cover him up? Okay, why on earth would we cover somebody up if the whole point is to, okay, I want you to think of bodybuilding contests. Mr. Universe, Those guys wear the tiniest little banana hammock, okay? You know what I'm saying, right? How on earth could you have a bodybuilding competition if those guys were close? It's impossible. You have to look at their muscles, right? And so, honestly, they ought to just go naked. I mean, you're not covering anything up, really. I mean, it's like, seriously, it's like, why are they even wearing anything, right? And so, think of it that way, right? A bodybuilding competition would be pointless if the men covered themselves up or the women that competed in. And the same is true with the Olympics. And there's stories behind it, too. For example, and here we go. Here are pictures of the other. And so, surviving Greek pottery shows all kinds of athletes. We have wrestling and, running, there's discus, right? Throwing the discus, all bare ass naked. Javelin, jumping, who can jump the farthest. The biggest of all was the chariot racing. Chariot racing was a huge deal. Chariot racing was a huge deal, very expensive. And the winner was the owner of the chariot team, not the guy driving the chariot, just in case you're wondering. The ancient stadium is actually still around, or at least one of them. You can still go there. Here is the archway that the athletes would enter into the starting line and the judges' box. It actually survived all the way up to the present, as crazy as that sounds. So they would all get there and as fast as they could. This hill along here is where they would all sit. And they actually know which city-state sat at which section of the hill because coins have been collected. So, Corinthian coins are in one section and Spartan coins are in one section. So they know which section the people sat, which is just mind-blowing. There's a story of an athlete and his coach was a female, which again is not acceptable. This is all about men competing, and that was the coaches too. And this is just a legend. It's apocryphal, so I don't know if it's true or not. But she was wearing a fake beard to try to pretend to be a man. And her athlete starts running, he's running and he starts winning. And so she starts jumping, cheering him on. And sure enough, it all falls out and everybody realizes that that's a woman, not a man. And so they passed a new rule that everybody's got to be naked. Everybody has to be naked.
Like washing?
Washing there. There you go.
Go to the Olympics.
There's also something to keep in mind. When you think about all of that, they were all super gay, okay? Super duper gay, okay? All of ancient Greek culture, all the men, gay. Not regular gay, super gay, okay? Your wife was there to have children and a family. The magic happens with your boyfriend. All of them. Every one of them, all the time. That's how ancient Greek rolled. So I'm sure that it's not seen in the naked Olympics at all, but you can kind of connect the dots anyway, but yeah, that's how it works. So in case you're wondering, and if you want to look into the vastly more disturbing aspects of what they did as super gay men, you're welcome to look up at it. I don't need to go into that. But in any event, let's keep going forward. Somebody once asked me, how do you know if they're super gay? And I say, if we're still talking about it 2,500 years later, 3,500 years later, I think that counts, right?
In the bathhouses?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. One of the Athenian leaders that pushed for war against Sparta, that really rallied the Greeks up in war against the Spartans, and those horrible Spartans were terrible people, was Pericles. And he was seen as a wise leader and all of that, and I'm sure he had qualities, but he also hated the Spartans and rallied the Athenians to fight rather than negotiate. He was very much a demagogue in that sense, somebody who's looking for their own power and their own wealth in themselves rather than what might be in the best interest of the people. And he is sort of a legendary leader of Athens that's quite controversial because rather than seek a peaceful solution, all he wanted to do was kill Spartans. We could talk forever about the ancient Greeks, but at the end of the day, we have to justify why. There are a lot of ancient cultures that we're not talking about that have equally rich histories, and there were important events, so on and so forth. But what we need to discuss is why is Greece, this little place of men that all like to fight each other and have way more hair than they need, why are we talking about them, right? The truth is, the Greeks are the founders of Western thought and philosophy. They are the first truly Western people. Some people even argue that the Battle of Marathon was when a line was drawn between the East and the West. And Western people said, we will not be conquered by Easterners. There is us and there is them, and you Easterners are staying on your side, and we Westerners will develop our own culture. There would not be a Western culture had the Athenians not won at Marathon. That's what some people argue, and I understand the value in it. So what is Western thought? What is Western philosophy? Well, the Greeks are the first people, as I already mentioned, to want to understand the world on rational human terms. The Greeks are the first Westerners because they decide we're going to learn how the world really works. The Persians, the Nubians, the Egyptians, the whoever's, I mean, all these other people that we mentioned, brilliant cultures, but they didn't get to philosophy. Why does it rain? It's the gods. You know, what is the sun? It's the eye of Horus. You know, all of these explanations, but they don't sit down and say, why does it really rain? What's really going on? What is that big fireball up in the sky? It's got to be something real, and I want to understand it. And you see, when you start doing that, you suddenly realize you don't know anything, right? You suddenly realize, I don't know. I don't know why water falls from the sky. I don't know why food grows from the ground. I don't understand how women get pregnant and babies are born. I mean, I know how to make it happen, but I don't understand the process. And once you start asking those questions, psychologically, your society takes an entirely gigantic leap forward. And the Greeks are the first to do that. Now, other people around the world did the same thing. The Chinese, for example, developed philosophy as well. But the Chinese are in a different part of the world. So we gotta talk to the Greeks. And this is the foundation of Western culture. This is the foundation of Western culture. We are all Westerners. We are all Westerners. Western culture spreads to Rome. Western culture spreads to Europe. Western culture spreads to all the places that Europe colonized. If you're speaking English, you're a Westerner. You just are. So where do we get with philosophy? Well, let's talk about some of these early philosophers. It is believed that the first were Athenians. We will call them Ionians. The original founders of Athens.
So the first word or world?
It's the first word. Ionians, Athenians. We believe this all started in Athens. And the traditional founders of Athens are known as Ionians. They were the Athenians before they were Athenian. We don't know why they took this step. We don't know why they decided to take a look at philosophy. I'll give you my theory on it in a little bit, but I want to start with an early one to kind of give you an idea of what I'm getting at. And that's this fellow here named Thales. It was 624 to 548 BC. Thales wanted to understand the composition of the world. What is everything made up of? You know, there's rocks, there's water, there's air, there's all this stuff. What is it? Interesting question to ask. And he finally concluded that everything in the world is connected to water. Water is the universal substance. And if you're in Greece, that kind of makes sense. It obviously is all up in the sky with the clouds, you know, because the water falls from the sky every once in a while. So that's all water up there. If you go anywhere in Greece, sooner or later, you hit the water, don't you? But it is more water than anyone could ever expand out on. When you watch rivers and you see the silt build up on the banks of rivers, it appears that the water is creating land. Islands kind of emerge from the sea as the wave action pushes them up. And the Greeks certainly know about that. And so water kind of creates everything. It's almost like the land is floating on a big old body of water. Now, of course, he's not right, but he's asking the right questions. That's the part of the matter. You'd be wrong as long as you're walking down the path to truth. Thales' students would expand on this. Thales' students would expand on this, and they would eventually conclude that there are 4 universal substances. Not just one, there's 4. Obviously, one is water. What are the other universal substances? Fire, earth, and air. Yeah. Water, earth, fire, and air. Water, earth, fire, and air. And humans are kind of a mix of all, right? You know, we have water in us, we have air in us. We have earth in us because we dry out whenever we die. There's also fire in us because we're warm, right? You know, when the fire leaves us, we get cold and we die. So we are a unique blend of everything. Now again, he's not right. His students aren't right. They're asking the right questions. They're exploring this, and sooner or later they figure it out. One interesting Greek named Democritus. You don't have to write him down. One Greek named Democritus was interested in how small things can get. You know, I can take a rock and I can break it, 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 and it turns into soil, turns into dust, right? Well, how small can it actually get? Because you see, it's pretty obvious that things are smaller than what I can see. You know, I can figure out that particles get so small the human eye can't see them, but yet they're still there. So how small could something get? And he finally concludes that there has to be a smallest piece. There has to be a smallest piece. If that was not the case, then nothing would move. Everything would be fixed. The entire world of substances that we live in is actually made up of bitty pieces, kind of like sand. And he says that's the only reason, that's the only way that we can move. That's the only way that anything can move, is because these pieces have to exist. And he called these atoms. The smallest piece that exists is called the atom. And he was right. Keep asking the right questions, and sooner or later you figure it out. Now, I didn't know anything else about atoms, but he did figure it out. Other Greeks are going to study other philosophical subjects. Pythagoras wants to understand how math works. We've all heard of the Pythagorean theorem when we took geometry, right? He figures out that there are laws to mathematics. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A right triangle. It doesn't matter what the other lengths of these are. A squared plus b squared will always equal c squared. He's a philosopher wanting to know mathematical truths. Hated by geometry students up to the present day. And the Pythagorean theorem is named for him because he's the one who figured it out. Hippocrates was the founder of medicine, human anatomy. How does the human body actually work? What are these different organs inside of us? What do they actually do? You can go to the Egyptians and say, what do these organs do? And they'll come up with something. It's all related to the gods. Your brain was a big stockpile, in case you're wondering. That's what the Egyptians decided. Your brain is just a big blob of stock. That's why it wasn't preserved in mummification. Your organs were preserved, but your brain was the only part of you that was worthless because who wants to preserve a big booger, right? I want to study how it really works. Because we all have the same parts in us, men and women notwithstanding. All women have sort of the same parts as men. All men have sort of the same parts as women, but all women are, biologically the same. All men are biologically the same. What is this? Because you see, if we understand the human body, if we know what these different gooey parts are, maybe we can figure out what really makes us sick. Maybe we can cure disease if we know why we're actually getting sick. It's not the curse of the gods. There's something here doing it. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. And there are all sorts of Greek philosophers that expand on all of these different ideas. What's really going on? And that opens the door to human philosophy. Social science. It's only a matter of time before they start applying these concepts to the way we behave. Why do we have law? Why do we have civilization? Why do we tend to behave the same from one family to the next, from one region to the next? Why do we tend to make the same mistakes over and over again? How is it that our culture here has nobility, commoners, and slaves, and this other group of people way over there that we never saw before has nobility, commoners, and slaves? Is there something inherent about humans that creates that, or what's the deal? One early group of social philosophers were called sophists. And the sophists argued, and I am simplifying the sophists, that right and wrong, positive and negative, is relative. Is a relative concept. Now, what do I mean by relative? I mean it depends on the circumstance. What is right and what is wrong depends on the circumstances. It's wrong to kill people, but are there a handful of situations where it's the right thing to do? Yeah, the guy that breaks into your house is coming at you with a chainsaw, you're going to have to defend yourself, right? It's an unpleasant reality, but there you go. There are situations where killing somebody is the unfortunate right thing to do. It's wrong to steal, but we can all come up with certain circumstances where that might be the better option. It's wrong to lie, but there's certain circumstances where perhaps that is a better reality. And so what is right and what is wrong depends on the circumstances. Now, why is it important we apply philosophy to this? You say, okay, whatever, who cares? Well, maybe we need to apply this to our laws, right? Maybe when we decide what is legal and illegal, maybe we should decide if you should be punished for what you did. Maybe we should look at the circumstances, right? I mean, this guy over here is a murderer, but this guy over here killed someone in self-defense. Obviously, there are different circumstances. We need to apply those to the law. So there's a reason why we need to study these things. We've all heard of this guy, right?
Yeah.
Socrates, certainly a brilliant ancient philosopher. Some would say the greatest ancient philosopher. It's up to you to decide that. Socrates was not a sophist. He completely disagreed. The sophists are wrong. Right and wrong is not relative. That is ridiculous. That is uncivilized. The very concept of right and wrong being relative to the circumstances is an absurdity. Now, everybody in this room is saying, no, that can't be right. Of course, right and wrong is relative. It makes absolute sense to not kill people unless they're coming at me with a chainsaw. It makes absolute sense to be honest unless I am in a situation where I have to lie for the better good. There are absolutely situations where relativity matters. And so Socrates can't be right. Problem solved, right? Socrates was wrong, we're done. Socrates says no.
Right.
Absolutely not. There is an absolute right, there's absolute wrong, and if you think it is relative to your circumstance, you are incorrect. And he's thinking even more deeply. Here's the deal. Socrates, like many philosophers, was actually a pretty lazy guy. He didn't really do anything else. We know that he was a soldier in the Peloponnesian War. He fought against the Spartans. He was Athenian, of course. All these guys are Athenian. We know that after the war, he became a stone worker. Now, you see all that marble on the Parthenon. Well, that's the sort of thing that Socrates did. These men are also called masons, a guy that works with stone. And when you're dealing with a chisel and a hammer and chipping marble all day long, it's a very, very difficult job. And it'll wear you out quick. That is not work for old men. That is a young man's sport. And so Socrates, of course, wore out his body and had to retire. He couldn't work anymore. And that is when he became a philosopher. So he became a philosopher as an old man after living a life that was about as common as anybody could be. And he stood out on the street corner saying, these sophists are wrong. The idea of relativity being the basis for our laws is an absurdity. And he had a very, very good reason. And once you study Socrates, you might suddenly say, you know what, Socrates might be right. But I'm not going to tell you today. We're going to have to wait till Thursday for me to explain to you what Socrates was thinking. So, y'all take care.